It's become a reoccurring theme on my channel to be incredibly late to the party on whatever I'm talking about. I mean, hell, the most recently released game I made a full video on was released almost 8 years ago. So when it comes to Owlboy, I don't think being 7 years late is any better. My name's Heiko, and I finally made some time in my horrifically empty schedule to play through Owlboy. This game has been buried in my Steam backlog since launch, and I just now got around to playing it. For those who aren't aware, Owlboy is a 2D adventure puzzle Metroidvania stealth owl simulator platformer that was released on PC in 2016 and 2 years later on console. The game was created over the span of 10 years by Norwegian developer D-Pad Studios, comprised of just 5 people. It's hard for me to say whether it was worth the wait considering, well, I didn't wait, but I can confidently say that it is definitely worth your time and $24.99 USD if you're both a fan of indie adventure games and owls. Speaking of owls, this game stars the young Otis, an up-and-coming apprentice owl who's constantly crushed by the crippling weight of social anxiety, and his master, Azio, who all around isn't a prick, but rather the whole cactus. I'll try to keep it light on the details of the story as I don't want to spoil anything, but throughout most of the story, Azio is basically just a massive ass to Otis, constantly doubting his ability to not be a waste of oxygen. And you feel for Otis because he's born mute. He can't say anything back to Azio, so anything he does either goes haywire or Azio just straight up doesn't believe. But for as much as the game wants you to hate characters like Azio, the writing makes that near impossible. Regardless of whether you take your time with it or not, the pacing of Owlboy allows you to get to know each significant character well enough to where you actually give a shit about them to a varying degree, with the bare minimum being it would suck if you died. Throughout the game, you're accompanied by Otis's lifelong friend, Getty, who basically takes up the speaking role for Otis. Along with this, Getty and other companions along the way will act as the game's main form of combat. See, Otis only has the ability to roll and spin, which aren't very effective. To make up for this, you're accompanied by Getty and friends, all with different ways of dealing with combatants through different forms of and gun. These companions are carried around by Otis, don't take damage, and can be switched out at a moment's notice. Each companion's weapon serves a different purpose, so you won't find yourself sticking with just one, especially during the later stages of the game. What I do find annoying is the fact that the only weapon with a cooldown sees a significant spike in its use, and the length of the cooldown can get slightly agitating at points. Even though Otis is able to fly freely without any character-based restrictions for 90% of the game, the enemies that litter the world are built around this mechanic, whether they're flying or just getting in your way. The game does shake up the combat formula in different ways throughout its runtime, whether that be by introducing stealth mechanics or just removing the ability for Otis to call upon his buddies for help, which is something that is done way less than it should have been, as I feel it adds a nice twist to the gameplay. The only problem I see with the combat is that it's slightly bland. Like, it's not bad or boring, it's just kinda like a plain bowl of Cheerios. Yeah, it's fine, but it only gets good when you add shit to it, which is where the owl part of Owlboy comes in. Like I mentioned earlier, Otis has the ability of flight. There's no time limit, there's no stamina bar, you don't have to constantly press a button to stay afloat, you just fly. At first, this may seem like a terrible idea for a platformer, but the whole game is built around this mechanic, the fact that you are the Owlboy. The geometry, the combat, everything is made to fit perfectly with the fact that Otis can fly. Now, due to the fact that you're an owl and you can fly, there's not much platforming to be done, save for the sections where your ability of flight gets taken away. And these sections are laid out and designed perfectly. The little flightless platforming there is done incredibly well. The controls for just about everything, at least on PC, feel very smooth, and the only clunky part is that one section where you're riding an earthworm dragon thing holding on for dear life as the camera spins around. All around, the game feels great. Otis's flying can take a second to get used to, but you get the hang of it pretty quick. Same thing with the partner system. The beginning of the game is paced out perfectly till you get used to the mechanics without it feeling like an annoying ass tutorial that has to hold your hand every second of the way. One thing that isn't paced out perfectly though is the difficulty. Listen, I know there's another really popular indie game from around the same release window that also follows the formula of a title with 2 unrelated words conjoined together to make a unique name, but Owlboy strays away from the trap of being difficult for the sake of being difficult, unlike Cuphead. The problem arises when you find out that D-Pad Studios are amazing at pacing out a story, but when it comes to difficulty, it's like falling up a cliff. One minute you're breezing through levels doing owl shit, and the next you're in 1945 Berlin, Germany getting hit with grenade spam the likes you've never seen. And did I technically make the game slightly more difficult by not getting the collectibles I was supposed to get to upgrade my health? Yeah, but does that detract from my point? No. The pacing is still shit, and I'm a dumb fuck who has the attention span of a hand grenade that was thrown 4 seconds ago. Overall, the game isn't super hard. It can be difficult, yes, but there's no live system, and death is far from a setback, and at most a minor inconvenience. Now, if you like going off the beaten path to get collectibles in the game, Owlboy is perfect for you. There are plenty of collectibles in this game, some more hidden than others, and each with different purposes, whether that be unlocking secret content or just getting shit to make the game easier. Now, while I may have overlooked almost all the collectibles during my time with Owlboy, it was literally impossible for me to overlook just how goddamn beautiful this game is. From the sprite work to the music, you can really see how much effort went into making this game. The attention to detail in the world and the handmade pixel art is so breathtaking that the amount of time and effort the artist probably put in is borderline concerning. I know you probably want me to nitpick and criticize the game more because Funny Owlman says funny things about poor game design, but I have nothing but positives to say from here on out, so fuck you. The world of Owlboy is one of the most immersive and well-made game worlds I've ever seen, up there with the likes of GTA 4 and Ratatouille for the Wii. The game has a functioning day and night cycle and is full of subtle animations that add so much more life to the game. Every NPC has their own completely unique personality, and I never found myself feeling like the world or atmosphere was getting boring or bland. Even though Owlboy is technically open world and lets you backtrack to areas you've already visited, the design and layout of each area always feels fresh and ever changing. One small issue I've always had with 2D games is how the layout of some levels would make zero sense in the real world, but Owlboy avoids that issue completely. Every place you visit makes sense and feels believable in the established world. The puzzles, of which I'll get into in a second, don't feel out of place or intrusive. Staying on the subject of puzzles, none of them are too easy or too complicated. They usually take a few seconds of critical thinking to solve, and at worst a few minutes. Listen, I'm gonna be brutally honest here, I have no idea how to segue from puzzles to music, so here's the same picture of a segue I used in my Bad Company video. Let's talk about music. Jonathan Gear's soundtrack for Owlboy is amazing, and if you disagree, you're wrong. Maybe it's the fact that it gives me overwhelming Pokemon Mystery Dungeon vibes, or the fact that the new prescription on my rose-tinted glasses is really strong, but I can't help but love this soundtrack. Some songs are incredibly catchy and recognizable, while some serve solely as a way to add to the atmosphere and the situation at hand. Soundtracks as a whole, whether it be in a movie, show, or video game, exist purely to add to the scene and reinforce or even completely set the tone of said scene. Owlboy's soundtrack accomplishes everything it needs to do with flying colors, and in my personal opinion, it's one of the best indie game soundtracks and a shining example of what to do when creating a game OST. Owlboy is in no way a perfect game. It doesn't deserve a 10 out of 10, but what it does deserve is your time and your money. This game is an experience, and as a bonus for the price point, you get actual fun gameplay thrown in as well, though far from spotless. D-Pad Studios have proven that a delayed game is eventually good, but a rushed game is forever a modern-day AAA gaming product. It's a nice change of pace going from barely functioning games made by billion-dollar companies to a game made by 5 people that has an overwhelming amount of heart and soul in it. And for every step Owlboy takes backwards with a minor issue or setback, it runs a mile with its incredible story. And did I mention owls?
Time flies by when everything is okay. It just turns out that life ain't that way. Big decisions overwhelm me, and I know nothing's free. When I don't think about much, people die and we don't know why. I can use some understanding, human contact, sign that contract. I don't want to let my life fly by. Do you ever stop to wonder why? Ever stop to wonder